My name is Ann Phelan. I'm the Manager of Resources and Engagement here at the Perkins Transition Center. We support all disabilities. We provide virtual programming, and we identified that sexuality is a topic that is very important to talk about. So we are creating this 4-part lunchtime series, and we welcome you all very, very much. We're building a community, and we're supporting all disabilities, whether the intellectual, physical, emotional, mental health, sensory, neurological, and as well as hidden disabilities. And we are here today to share information, to break down barriers, to release fear, also to affirm human rights and dignity, and challenge the way we think about people with disabilities related to sexuality. We welcome advocates with disabilities who are attending this event. We thank you for your presence and we honor that. Our series is really intended to provide resources and provide tools and information to help all of you navigate this experience. I just want to share that a couple months ago, I saw My Disability Roadmap, a documentary by Dan and Samuel Habib. And Samuel is an advocate with a disability, and he talks very poignantly and openly about his desire to date and have a sexual relationship. And in this amazing documentary that we will have a link to later in the resources, he talks to other people with disabilities and how they experience this part of life. And when I saw that documentary, I realized that we really needed a series that really addressed the topics of sexuality. So without further ado, I want to introduce my teacher and my colleague, who I honor for being here today, Katherine McLaughlin from Elevatus Training. Welcome, welcome, Katherine. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been a sexuality educator and trainer for over 30 years. My specialty is really focused on sexuality for people with intellectual disabilities, but also all disabilities as well. And over the years, I've worked directly with people with disabilities around sexuality. I have also done lots of parent workshops and also staff training as well. And one of the things that happened early on in my career is a lot of developmental disability agencies and schools were reaching out to me and asking me to help them address sexuality. And I was working at the time at Planned Parenthood. And also at that same time, I experienced an accident and became a wheelchair user. And so both of those things happening around the same time really led me down this path. And a lot of my work has been focused on sexual self-advocacy, which we'll talk about it next week. But it's been about how do you speak up for what you want in your life around sexuality and relationships, and then also how do you speak up in your relationships as well. So that's been a focus of my work. I have a curriculum that I developed with a group of self-advocates in Vermont. I live in New Hampshire, and I went to work with them and I said, I'm going to create this curriculum. And they said, hold on, nothing about us without us. We want to be part of designing these materials. And we also want to be one of the teachers of these materials. So a lot of my work has involved self-advocate professional teams, and some self-advocates are professionals, but at least one person on the teaching team has a disability of some sort. So we're going to talk about a couple of tips and tools for positive, effective sexuality conversations. So how can we have these conversations? And I think the tricky part is that many of us did not have these conversations growing up ourselves. And so that can be a real barrier for us. And like, I don't even know what a healthy, normal conversation even sounds like. You know, as a culture, we either don't talk about it or we joke about it. But to really talk about it is not something that many of us are used to. At least growing up, we didn't have it. There's a lot of parents who said, yeah, no one talked to me, but I'm switching that. I'm talking to my own kids about it. So lots of people are trying to do better. But we're going to look at what are the qualities of an askable person? So someone that you would want to ask a question of. We're also going to examine tips for having these conversations and also explore ways to respond to sexual behaviors as well. So very practical tools today. And when I talk about sexuality, I mean more than sex. That is an aspect of it, absolutely. But it's also about intimacy, connection, and belonging. So feeling connected and close to other people, feeling like you are part of something, a community, a group. Um, and so that's an aspect of our sexuality, is that feeling close and connected to people. It's also about all of our different kinds of relationships. So our friendships, maybe sexual romantic relationships, but also relationships in our families, relationships with our teachers, um, all kinds of people in our lives that we have relationships with. It's also about how we feel about the gender that we were assigned when we were born, and our gender identity and sexual orientation, who we're attracted to. That's an aspect of our sexuality. It's about how we feel about others and our relationship with others, but also about ourselves. And many self-advocates talk about lacking self-worth and not feeling like they matter or they're valued, and that's part of our sexuality, is feeling like we have high self-esteem, we feel good about who we are, we feel confident. That's a piece of sexuality. And it's also about sexual expression and behavior too. But it's a big part of who we are as humans. And we are sexual beings from birth to death. And that doesn't mean you're having sex. It means you have a sexuality, and everyone has a sexuality. So when you think about this topic of sexuality, and let's say you personally had a question that you wanted to ask someone about sexuality, what are the qualities that you would want this person to have? And you can put your ideas in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, what would you want if you needed to ask a question? I'll give you a minute to put some ideas in the chat. So what would you look for in a person if you had one of these kind of personal questions? A good listener. Yep. Great. What other qualities? Non-judgmental, sure. Have an open dialogue. Someone who has a healthy relationship. Kind, sincere, patient, humor, a little bit of humor never hurts. Uh, Not as a way to deflect, but to diffuse nerves. Yeah, sort of make it a little more uplifting and more relaxing. Great. Knowledgeable, not pushing their own agenda, religion, or beliefs. Yes. Calm, honest. Yeah, these are great. And this is really what we want to convey ourselves. And one of the comments was about open dialogue. And there was a study done years ago where they asked adolescents, do you speak to your parents about sexuality? And those that said, yes, I do, they asked, well, what is it about them? And they didn't give them this language, but what they said was they're open. So there's just this feeling that you get of openness. And I think pieces of that are not pushing your own agenda and being knowledgeable, and also being non-judgmental as well and not reactive. And one of the things as a culture is we're very reactive about sexuality. We don't just respond. And that's one piece I'm always wanting people to think about, is respond, don't react. We tend to just kind of react to it rather than just respond calmly. Okay, so thank you for all of that. So keep those in mind when you think about having conversations with your own kids. And as professionals, same thing, someone might come to you with a question, or a parent might come to you with some questions. And I think all of those qualities are what we need in talking about sensitive topics. So your role as a parent in particular, and then we can talk about professional, is to give information. We also want to listen, and that was one of the qualities listed. We also want to model healthy relationships as well. That sends a very strong message to children in our lives, how we're interacting in our relationships. We want to offer support. We want to answer questions honestly and not avoid questions if we get them. And we just really want to think about responding in a positive way about sexuality. Great. I just saw another comment, someone who understands what others have been through. Yeah, so maybe empathy. Yeah, just really understanding like this is a tough topic to talk about. Yeah, so what I want to ask you is to think about some of the messages you might be giving your own children, or if you're in a professional role, people you're supporting. Are you giving negative messages about this topic? Because what we really want to do is be open, but also positive and supportive and empowering. So I'm going to give you a few tips and some tools so you can think about how you might answer questions if you were to get a question as well. But I think the first thing is you might have to initiate the conversations. You know, if you have a more than one child, you might know like one person asks tons of questions, one of the children, and the other doesn't ask a lot of questions. So you might have to initiate it. And there's lots of ways to do that. Like, oh, I attended this lunch and learn, and they talked about sexuality, and I'd like to talk with you about some resources that I got at the workshop, or something that kind of opens it up. We also want to use inclusive language because we don't know, and this is for parents and professionals, there's sort of an assumption that everyone is heterosexual, and we know that that's just not true. And so we want to use language that is open. And so we might say something like to our son, do you want a partner or a romantic partner or a sexual partner? Rather than a girlfriend, and sort of assume heterosexuality. So kind of keep it neutral and open as well. It's okay to feel embarrassed when we talk about this. And I know Anne mentioned fear and kind of relief. Like it's embarrassing. Some of these topics are embarrassing, and it's okay to feel embarrassed. And sometimes naming that is good to do as well. Like, oh gosh, my cheeks are rosy right now because I just feel so uncomfortable, but it's such a good conversation. I'm so glad we're having it. It's also all right not to know the answer. And I've got a bunch of handouts and including resources for you that you might find really helpful. And you can say, that is such a great question. Let's look it up, and look it up. Yeah. So somebody said sometimes my son doesn't want to talk about it. Yeah. And so sometimes a tip there, and we'll get to it in just a minute, but I can jump ahead, is to talk about things outside of him. Not like, do you want a partner and that kind of thing, but watch a movie, watch something. A recent parent group talked about Gilmore Girls, was something that she and her daughter watched, and then they could talk about it afterwards. And that's a way to teach and talk about sexuality and talk about your own values as well as a parent. For professionals, we want to keep our values neutral. So similar to what you put in the chat, you know, someone not pushing their own agenda. But parents are allowed to have values and tell their kids their values. That's one of our jobs too. And it's okay to answer a question later. You can always say, great question. You know, I want to think about that a little bit before I answer it, but just make sure you go back and say, okay, I had a few minutes. I wanted to think about it. Here we go. We also want to talk about it in a private place. And many parents talk about being in the car as the perfect place to talk about this, where it's private, you know, it's just the two of you in the car. They can't escape. And so and you're not looking directly eye contact with one another. So a lot of times it's finding a place that's private, and sometimes doing something else. You don't have to be sitting and looking at each other. You can be folding laundry or doing other things while you're talking about it, so it isn't as intense as well. But we also want to use a private tone, like this is a private topic. And I know some parents talk about, I'm afraid that if I talk about it, my son or daughter will tell everyone about these topics. And so we want to frame it as a private thing for us to talk about. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just private. Just like changing your clothes. You go to a private place when you change your clothes. There's nothing wrong with changing your clothes. It's just something we do in private. We want to give age appropriate information. And sometimes this comes up in particular with people with cognitive impairments. People might think, well, they have a mental age, and I'm putting quotation marks, or a cognitive age. And so we should just teach them what 7-year-olds need versus 21-year-olds or 15-year-olds. And what we want to base it on is the biological age. So no matter whether the person has a disability or not, and they're 18 years old, they need the same information. And how you teach might be a little different if someone has a cognitive impairment, but not what you teach necessarily. We want to use models, visuals, television. So talking about relationships when you watch a television show, soap operas. There was a developmental disability agency that they'd watch a soap opera episode and then they'd talk about it afterwards as a tool for teaching. Role plays, scenarios, all kinds of ways to talk about it. You can even discuss things at the dinner table. I read this article today about consent and just talking about it as a just general conversation. We also want to try to give a consistent message, so not only empowering and supportive, but also consistent, that in particular, your child is getting the same message at school with professionals that you're giving at home. It's not always the way it is, but the more consistency, then there's more repetition, and that's really helpful when learning about this. I also mentioned to try not to react. Respond, don't react. So you'll notice, like, all of a sudden, whew, and you kind of have a jolt to your system. And we just want to, take a deep breath and respond. And I'm going to show you a teachable moments tool that can be really helpful in some of those awkward moments. Like maybe you get a question and you're not quite sure how to answer it. Oh, okay. Yes. Fun set. Yeah. Said sometimes watching rom-coms can make you feel more single, because you haven't dated. So sometimes those shows can make you talk about what you want in your life or the lack of what you want in your life as well. Yeah. So we're also going to talk about practicing and thinking about how would you answer? Like think of the absolute scariest question you would get and how would you answer it? But I'm also going to show you a tool that's really helpful. All right, so this is like a game changer because if your child or someone in your professional role asks you a question, we often feel like we have to have the perfect response. And so this helps slow things down a little bit and gives you some time to think about how you want to answer the question. So the first thing is reassure the person or the child that it's a good question to ask. So that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So you're also sending the message that you are willing and able to talk about this topic too. You also want to find out what the person thinks or is really asking. So this is done by saying, do you have any idea what that means? Or can you tell me where you heard that? Or so you're getting a little more information around how much do they know? And also, how much do they know? And also where they might have heard it too, because then you might need to add a little bit more to that as well. So there's also some YouTube clips where there's a young girl sitting at the island in the kitchen doing her homework, and she says to her mom, "What's virgin?" And the mother goes through this whole thing about sex and, takes about 5-10 minutes to go through this whole thing. And then, is feeling pretty good about herself. And then the daughter says, "Well, then what does extra virgin mean?" So she had seen the bottle of olive oil on the counter and asked, "What's virgin?" So if the parent had said, "What do you think that means?" Or where did you see that word? Then she would have said the olive oil. And then you would have gone down a different path. So it's good to know what they know, where they're coming from, where they might have seen it. And then the next thing is we want to decide what messages we want to give. And again, this is the piece that I was talking about earlier, where we want to give positive messages. We want to normalize talking about it. We want to reassure young people, young adults about these different pieces of sexuality. So giving reassurance and normalizing are great messages to give. We want to answer the question simply using medical terminology. So we want to make sure that everyone with a disability, without a disability, knows the medical terms for sexual parts. And it's okay to have slang words, but the reason we want to use medical terminology is, one, it normalizes just another body part. This is what it's called. It also gives people language and power. And language, there was a recent situation at a day program where a young woman said, he keeps touching my purse. And so they took her bag and put it in different places. And it took 3 weeks before they realized that purse was a slang term for her vagina. And so making sure that young people, all people, know the medical terminology is important for protection as well. So you give the information and then you encourage the person to give you feedback, like, do you have any more questions? Or sometimes you can do, like, can you teach me now that I taught you? So you can kind of check for understanding as well. But, that's if someone's really engaged. As was mentioned in the chat, my son gets overwhelmed and doesn't want to talk about it. So probably he's not going to want to keep talking. And sometimes with young people who don't want to talk about it, we can say, you know what, I just need 2 minutes and I'm just going to say this and then I'm just going to leave. And, so that they're getting some of the information. So this is a great tool. So you get a surprising question and you do step 1. That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Step 2, can you tell me where you heard that? Or can you tell me where you saw that word, or do you have any idea what that means, right? So you're already having this open dialogue, discussing it. Decide the messages, answer simply, and see if they have any more messages. So here's an example of a question that you could potentially get, right? So we're not going to go into breakout rooms just for time, but we can talk about how we might answer this. So if we're using the model, what is a boner? So a child says, what is a boner? Let's say they're 18 years old. What is a boner? And we could say, that's a really good question. Can you tell me where you heard that? Or do you have any idea what it means or what it's about? And then we're going to answer, give positive messages and answer. So how could you answer that question? And you could put your ideas in the chat. How would you answer that? Great, yes. So yes, I know exactly what that means. An erection, when someone feels sexually excited. So yeah, so an erection is when the penis gets hard, right? So that's the physical aspect of it. And sometimes it's because of sexual excitement or you have sexual feelings for someone else, but sometimes it happens because clothes rub. And sometimes it happens because you wake up in the morning and you have to go to the bathroom. So it can happen other times as well, but that is absolutely one of the times. And it's a slang word. Boner is a slang word for an erection, which is when the penis gets hard. So very matter of fact, kind of go right to your brain and just say, what does this mean? And answer the question simply. Great. So that's that one. I didn't make you do that one, so you're lucky. But the other tool that's helpful is the Scarborough Method. So this was developed by Winifred Kempton, and she talks about, we want to talk about physical aspects, like, yes, it's an erection. And we also want to, yes, and you might need to explain slang. Yes, sometimes I'll say slang or nickname for erection. Yeah, great. Thank you, Julie. So we want to talk about the physical aspects as well as the social aspects around that question and any emotional aspects of that question as well. So we could say something like, it's a nickname, boner is a nickname for an erection. An erection's when the penis gets hard. And if it happens when somebody's in private, it can feel really nice to have an erection. But if it happens in public, the person that has the erection might feel embarrassed, or other people might feel embarrassed. And so we want to go somewhere private when we have an erection. And I know many mothers have said to me, you know, I have a son and I just don't know about these things. And one of the things I did when I first started doing this work was I read about puberty for boys, just to learn more about someone that had a different body part than me. Yeah, totally normal response. Yeah. So again, that normalizing, it can happen for a few reasons. Do you know any of them? Yeah. So asking questions, but giving those messages like, good question. What do you think it means? And it's totally normal for this to happen. Yeah, great. But you can definitely put in more social aspects and emotional aspects. Here's just another example. What is a condom? A rubber sock that covers a penis. Using a condom is private. It protects you and your partner. And many people feel good when they're using them because they're protecting themselves and their partner. It's important to also address cultural aspects, including faith. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Who's that?
So maybe your own cultural aspects or your own faith as a parent, you might want to add some pieces in around that, I think is what you're saying. Okay, right. So for the person you're talking to. Yeah, mostly related to religion. Yeah, I mean, some people will have religious beliefs. I'm gonna be values inclusive. So I accept other people's values. I don't impose my values in my professional role. And so, yes, I think finding out like, well, what's important to you, or how does this fit with your religion or your faith might be something that you bring up as well. Great. All right, so we're not going to do any practice here, but you know, the next question someone could say, how are babies made? And you could do the same thing. Like, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Do you have any idea how that happens? So it's just really, it helps people know where they need to go, and also slows down the conversation. All right, I want to just check in with people here, and I've been trying to follow the chat. So I don't know if there's anything I might have missed, but I think I got it all. But I wanted to just check in to see if anyone had any questions right now before we move into the next piece. Yeah, so Kristen, I'm not sure what you mean. Like if someone said, what about Jesus?
So I was just thinking, you know, as an individual with that cultural background or the religious background, and
Yep.
you were going through this and they said, well, what about Jesus? Like, what does he think? Or will I be in trouble? And just directing him towards how that could be different for all of us. And how do you know, what are your thoughts on that? You know,
Yep.
do you worry about that kind of thing?
Yeah, gotcha. I see what you're saying. Yes, got it. And even, you know, this might be something you want to talk with your family about as well, to see what they think too. Could you talk to your parents about that as well? So yeah, just the more we can keep conversations going, the better. All right, sounds like people don't have any questions, so let me keep going then. So I think another piece, and I'm going to give you another tool, and then we'll have some time at the end to look at resources, but this is a tool for responding to sexual behaviors. So we're talking about maybe a sexual behavior or a comment that someone makes, and we want to make sure that, you know, we decide in the beginning, is it something we're just going to ignore? Because sometimes we do ignore behavior, right? But sometimes we have to address certain behaviors, sexual behaviors. And this is a similar model from the Center for Sex Education. So we want to name the behavior, or comment to the person, praise if appropriate, but that's a different thing. We're going to say, I see your, we're going to just like name it. And then the next thing we want to do is find out the meaning behind the behavior. Now, not everybody knows the meaning behind behaviors. So if you were to say, can you tell me why you're doing that? They may not be able to articulate it. Or they might, an example of one topic that comes up is around masturbation in public. So we could say, I see you're touching your sexual parts in a public place. You're going to need to stop. Can you tell me why you're doing that? So that might give us some information. The person might say, it doesn't feel good. It itches, it hurts, right? That gives us some information. But other times we have to really just think about, well, what could possibly be the meaning behind this behavior? It could be lots of different things. They could be having sexual feelings for someone in the room. They could have to go to the bathroom. They could be uncomfortable. They could be stimming. They could be nervous and it's soothing to them. All kinds of things. So we want to learn to really think about what are all the possible meanings behind the behavior so that we can address that. And one of the things we do often with people with disabilities is we say, no, not here, not here. But then we don't talk about where. So that need isn't getting met. Just saying no to a need doesn't solve the need, or meet the need. So we want to make sure that we say, okay, not here, but you could in private. And we can talk about privacy, public and private. There's lots of different behaviors that we do only in public. Only in private, and behaviors that we do in public, and sort of doing a lot around public and private behaviors as well. So we're going to find out the meaning, and then we're going to decide what message to give, and we want to respond simply and see what happens. So it's another tool to use around responding to behaviors. So I just wanted to see if anyone had a particular sexual behavior that they are observing that they may want to talk a little bit about, and just do kind of a quick brainstorm around what might be going on. So I'll leave that open in case someone wants to bring up a stalking. Okay, great. So let's look at stalking. So here's somebody that is following somebody around, stalking them. So we're talking about the person that is stalking. So let's talk about what are all the possible reasons this could be happening. Like, what do you think is underneath this behavior? What is it trying to tell us? So you can put your ideas in the chat. So we're just going to brainstorm. Following someone around. Doesn't know how to approach them. Attraction. Have a crush on that person. Exactly. Wanting to connect socially, but not knowing how to connect. Yeah, that's usually what it is, right? I feel these feelings towards this person, and I don't know what to do with it, except I love looking at them and following them, and I just want to be near them. Enjoys being nearby. Yeah, exactly. Right. And sometimes I get calls from people on the other end of the stalking saying, it's really creepy and I'm really scared. And so chances are it's harmless, right? But we've got to teach those skills, those social skills around, if you're attracted to someone, here are the steps to getting to know them. You can start, get to know their name, ask them how they're doing today, sort of building this relationship and teaching those skills of friendship skills. And then, moving beyond friendship as well. So starting with, really trying to talk about how do you connect in that way? Okay, just a couple things in the chat. It's helpful here. They may not know that appropriate. Yeah, limited verbal ability. Yeah, exactly. Struggles to accept redirection and interventions. Yeah, so it could be really tricky to change this behavior. Yeah. stalking is not great and can get you into trouble and arrested in some cases. Exactly. So we have to talk about that. Even though you may not be, so you can say, I see, or I've heard that you've been following so-and-so around. Can you tell me why you're doing that? So then we can get at, well, they're so gorgeous, or I love being around them, right? So then we know it's an attraction. Yeah, those feelings are really normal to have about somebody else. One thing is it can be, as was written in the chat, it's not a great idea and can get you in trouble because people get scared. They don't understand that you're trying to connect. They think that you could be about to harm them. So we want to talk about that and then teach the skills to how do you connect with someone that you find really attractive? How do you meet them and give them your name and, start the process as well. Approaching younger individual, yeah, not in their age range. So that's the other piece too, is really thinking about who can you be in a sexual romantic relationship with? And we want to ask those questions like, is it okay with someone who's not at the age of consent? So we want to make sure people know that there's an age. So someone might say yes, but if they're underage, they can't say yes, even if they've already said it. So we want to talk about age, and that age is an important thing to think about. You can't be sexual with someone that's a helping professional in your life, like your teacher or your direct support provider. Even if you had feelings for them, you can't. But who could you be in a relationship with? And it's usually someone that is around your age, not always, but they're old enough, and you find them attractive, and they're not a helping professional and all those pieces. So really, like, who is it appropriate to be in a sexual romantic relationship with as well? Yeah, so lots and lots of skills. And I think one of the things in particular for parents is this feeling of kind of overwhelmed, like, where do I begin? And that's where I'll show you some of these resources that could be really helpful. Great. So here's just a couple of other things to consider when you're looking at why a behavior is happening. So is it in the structure, something in the environment? Maybe they have sexual feelings for someone in the environment, or maybe they're not allowed privacy at home, and this is the most private place, or, is it something about the environment? Is it being modeled somewhere else? And this might be more in a professional role where you're working in a group home and someone is modeling certain behavior publicly. Is it partner selection? Is it because they have no options for partners? Now, a lot of people with disabilities, when I talk to them about different kinds of relationships, they'll say they have family and helping professionals, no friends, no casual friends, no groups they're part of, no partners, right? So they only have family and maybe a direct support provider. And so they keep asking the direct support provider out, because that's the only option they have. So how do we open that up and increase partner selection? So start making other kinds of relationships, other kinds of connections. Such as, instead of saying, I like boys, use instead, I like men. Yeah, so we might tell people, we might change it depending on, yeah, like worrying about boy, like I'm 21 and I like boys. Well, actually, what do you mean by like? I think would be probably the first thing I'd want to know. And if they say, oh, I want to be in a sexual relationship with them, then it might be, well, actually, they're too young to be in a sexual relationship with you. You want to think about some men who are older, than the boy. So 18 and up, or whatever the age of consent is in your state as well. Yeah, right. Media can be very confusing. And so we can talk about media as well. And again, we don't have to have all the answers. We just want to say, hey, I saw this thing on social media. Do you know much about that? Or, just sort of throwing some things around and see what works. Inappropriate courtship. This is similar to the stalking example. So they've never been taught how to court someone, how to become friends with someone, how to, if you want more than friendship, go beyond that. Could it be a lack of knowledge or skill? So this could be, public and private, or how do you court someone? So is it knowledge based? Is it their learning history? Were they given messages that were negative? Like, no, 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 you can't do that. And so now they have trouble doing that, whatever it might be. So is it something with their learning history as well? And then another one that can be an issue for people with disabilities, in particular cognitive impairments, is perpetual arousal. So they feel very aroused all the time. And the reason that that happens is sometimes they don't know how to masturbate. And so they're always aroused. They don't complete the act and release sexual feelings. And there are a couple of videos that sometimes parents, sometimes professionals will use, and it's for somebody with a disability to watch on their own. And again, we want it to be, age appropriate, and they would watch it on their own, and it shows how masturbation works. And the reason it was developed is there was a educator who years ago said people were teaching masturbation skills hand over hand and showing people how to masturbate. And he said, no, we just, we need some boundaries here. And so maybe teaching through video, not for everyone, but it is an option. And sometimes that perpetual arousal can cause other behaviors as well. So I was talking with a parent once who her son would always touch women out in public. And we kept talking about boundaries and all these different pieces. And it turns out we backtracked, and she realized he probably wasn't completing the act of masturbation. So he was aroused all the time. Is it something medical that's going on as another thing to explore? Is it medications, adjustment in medication that might be something that's causing a certain behavior? And then the last thing is it because no one has ever told them it isn't okay? We tend to infantilize people with disabilities and kind of treat them like children. And so we might excuse behavior, right? Like, oh, they didn't mean anything, it's fine. But we want to make sure that they know what's okay and not okay. Like the stalking, we might say, oh, they're harmless, but we really want to make sure that they understand that it's not okay to stalk. And so we want to make sure we're giving them the rules. And similar to what was in the chat, you could get arrested for stalking. So people need to know the rules of how to work in a society as well. So those are some other things that could be behind the behavior as well to consider. So I want to open it up to, I have a few scenarios, but I want to see if any of you have anything you want to bring up. And then I also want to, oops, I don't have the handouts. I'm just going to put in the chat the handout link in case you didn't have it. I know it was sent out ahead, but I want to show you some of these handouts because I think you'll find them very helpful. So the first are a list of resources for people with disabilities or self-advocates. Then there's one for parents. So you can see here, there's some Elevatus, that's my company. We have a self-study course for parents. We've got a resource page with lots of free resources and articles for you to look at. You can sign up for our e-newsletter. But this is the one I want to show you, the Disability Inclusive Sexual Health Network. I'm just going to, bring this up a little bit so you can see it. So this, if you click on this, there's a bunch of resources, and there's a pelvic exam social story, all different kinds of things like toolkits for parents. And these are for parents of kids with disabilities. And if you scroll way down this PEATC, so this is Parent Education Advocacy Training Center, and they have many, many topics, these little toolkits or fact sheets, I think they're called. So if you do body rights and knowledge, it's in English and Spanish. So you just pull that up. And just there's, 2 pages, and you can kind of read through and think about, okay, these are some messages that I'm going to give my child about body knowledge and body rights. I'm always saying to parents, you can do one a week. The homeschool curriculum is body knowledge and body rights this week. So we're going to just really reinforce that this week and talk about some of these messages here. And then also, there's many other topics. So let me just show you. Oops. I think I can go back. Here we go. So birth control, safe and healthy boundaries, consent, go away and tell someone, social media, puberty, public and private. So lots and lots of topics. So that's a great resource for all of you. We talked more about skills today, but that can help you with a lot of the content. And then we're going to be doing 3 other topics these next 3 weeks too. Okay, so I'm just checking in the chat. I guess can both the children in different places in their sexuality and where they are in their comfortability and stage. Yes. And what they're looking for. Right. So really those open-ended questions as well. Yes. So in the chat, I just put the handout link, and the slides are in there, a PDF of the slides. So let me show you those. So these are the resources for parents. So lots of great things for parents. And these are some videos as well that I worked on the project with the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities in New York State. And there's 4 empowerment videos for people with disabilities. One is just talking about sexuality and people with disabilities. The second one is what is sexual self-advocacy? And we're going to talk about that next week. What are sexual feelings and relationships? And the last thing is consent. And they all involve people with disabilities talking about either giving advice about relationships or what sexual self-advocacy means. So even showing those to your children would be a great thing, because it's giving positive messages. So if you go down, there's also one for professionals. So there'll be some similar resources for professionals. And then Scarborough Method, we talked a little bit about, but just gives you some examples. And here are the slides. So all the slides are right here. So you have access to those. Teachable Moments is here as a handout too, that you can have. Great. Yeah. So how can one deal with the fixation or perseveration on dating? Yeah. So it's hard to deal with fixation and perseveration on anything, right? So I think part of it is, there's a time for talking about dating, and there's a time where we're not going to talk about dating. So kind of setting some boundaries around that too might be helpful, but I'm curious what other people have done around any topic. How do you deal with that fixation and perseveration in your life with the people you support or with your own children? What do you do? I mean, I think that's my advice, is to really have like, okay, let's talk about dating. We're going to talk for the next half an hour about it, and then we're not going to talk about it anymore. And if you want to go spend some time by yourself, writing about it, thinking about it, but I'm going to talk for a half an hour. Yeah. So even, right, you could even start with, let's just talk about the first step, which is, who is it okay to be in a sexual relationship with? All right, we're done talking about dating today. We can talk tomorrow. Next time we'll talk about, well, how do you get to know someone? Yeah, in this video that you mentioned that demonstrates yeah. Let me put it in the, let me see, actually, now that you're bringing that up, I think it's in the professional one, but let me double check on that. Nope, it isn't. Yeah, it's from Diversity Press, and they only have DVDs, which I don't know, I don't use DVDs anymore. Yeah, so sometimes I use the script. You seem to be stuck on this. and break it down again, going over steps. One doesn't go right to dating. Right. Yeah. So let's take this first step and really learn about it and think about it. And yeah, great. So it's called Diverse City. Diversity, and I don't know if you can check this for me, but that would be where they have the videos. And yeah, like I said, it's not for everyone, but you might have a child that might need to learn this skill, and it would be a great resource. They don't have someone else to talk to, right? So that could be another reason is, thank you, Anne. They're perseverating because no one will talk to them. You might want to loop in a therapist, mentors, or even friends. Yep. So find other people to talk to about it. And even that, can you tell me why you want to talk about this all the time? Because we can find out what's underneath a lot of it as well. We've talked about the circles of persons we know and the nature of the relationship, particularly important in workplace. Yeah. So, right. I talk about, if you're going to talk about dating and sexual things and your body and body parts, we only talk to certain people about those. And really, it's family in a private place, and maybe close friends. If you have close friends, maybe a doctor or a nurse, and you're in an exam room. Or maybe the school nurse at school. But those are topics we don't talk to everyone about. Like you're saying, here you are at work, that's an acquaintance or a casual friend. And kind of understanding those boundaries are helpful for people because they could get in trouble. I mean, I work with Project Search, which is employment training program for people with disabilities, and people lose their jobs, not because of inability to do the task, because of not understanding coworker relationships. And so we worked on a curriculum for Project Search where we talk about healthy relationships, and friendly doesn't mean that they're your friend. We're friendly to lots of people, but it doesn't mean we're friends with all these people as well. And so these are just some topics to think about and teach. So I just want to check in the chat about the questions or anything, and let me just share my screen for a minute too. As parents deal with ruminating or hyperfocus, one needs to consider when it's curiosity and normal ideas versus OCD-like behaviors. Discuss with therapists. Right, exactly. Sometimes we might say, oh, it's disability or it's OCD, but it could be typical to want to talk about these things. Great point. All right. Any other questions at this point? And then we could do a couple of scenarios if anyone doesn't have any. Oh, actually, we got to wrap things up, it looks like. Yeah. So talking about, oh yeah, how do you deal with rejection? Yeah, great question. I usually talk about it around getting a no and accepting a no, because whether it's for sexual things or dating or whatever, someone says no to you, how do you manage that? And what we don't want to do is scream and yell at the person and make them try to change their mind or make us feel better. So when we're rejected, it really hurts, and it's being rejected is part of life. And so we've got to figure out, what can we do when we feel sad or hurt because someone said no to us? We asked someone out on a date and they said, no, I'm not interested. That hurts, right? And so what can we do? Talk about the hurt, but then what do you do when you're feeling sad or hurt? What makes you feel better? And teach that it's your job to manage your feelings, not the other person's job as well. What was the name of the movie you mentioned? Was it Gilmore Girls, maybe? It's a TV series. Is that the one? Yeah. Simple thing I've heard. You just gotta move on. I know it hurts, but yeah, I think it's pretty much the only option. Right. And what I also do too is I teach people, like, you could ask someone out on a date, and if they, do you want to go to the movies tomorrow night? And they say no, you could ask for something different. Like, well, do you want to go for a walk in the park tomorrow morning? And if you get a second no, then you need to move on. You don't want to keep asking the same thing over and over again. When someone says no, they mean no, and we want to listen to that. And, we can teach consent to all kinds of things, not just sexual consent, but consent to going to the movies and accepting a no is a skill. Okay, great. Oh, yeah, yes. And Dan Habib is here. Excellent. And let's see, I think I'm going to pass it to you, Anne, right? You're going to do a few of the slides for the
Yes,
ending
thank you,
piece?
Catherine. Every
But I
time you
just,
speak, I grab something new and another gold nugget of information. Also, the incredible sharing and questions and thoughts today. When you bring dialogue, it brings much more meaning, and you're answering and asking questions for other people. So thank you all. And for the advocates with disabilities who are sharing as well, I appreciate your perspective. Catherine, you were just a gold nugget of information today, and we're looking forward to the next 3 sessions. I just want to say, from a transition specialist perspective, not talking about sexuality until things start cropping up as young adults get older. I've seen it over and over again where these things are kind of not talked about or suppressed or kind of pushed away. It's not a good outcome. It's really important to strategically and step by step and age appropriately talk about sexuality. So let's all give ourselves a hand for being here today and holding space together in a trusting space. Thank you so much. So we'll be continuing next week, same time, same place. We want to let you know a little bit about the Transition Center, who is bringing you this free series. We do offer one-on-one transition counseling that is available to provide support around transition. I am a trained sexual educator through Katherine's program at Elevatus. For any professional, I highly recommend the 3-day series of trainings. And then I also was involved in the Planned Parenthood and family planning in the 80s. So it's been a full circle for me, but we do have this support for families who need a little bit more help, as well as Katherine's support through Elevatus. Next slide, please. Maybe that's the last. Oh, okay. We do have a Facebook community, and if you take your camera and hold it over the QR code, it'll bring you to our Facebook group. We welcome you. Katherine is welcome to post things, professionals here as well. We have people asking some really great questions, so thank you. We want to thank everybody. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you. We'll see you next Wednesday, same time. Thank you for all your presence. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.